everybody. Welcome to the session about interculturality, and I'm sorry about these problems with the sound. I'll do my best. So what I will talk about in today's webinar, I will talk about how telecollaboration can lead to intercultural understanding. I will first talk about the Cultura model, and we'll look at how a Cultura exchange is structured. I will explain the approach and methodology, and I will describe the materials and the task. And I will, in the process, I will give you a number of examples. So what is Cultura? Cultura is a telecollaborative project that was started at MIT in a French language class. It's now adapted to other languages and cultures. And there are exchanges between different cultures, between the US and Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, between Italy and Turkey and Poland, Canada, Morocco, etc. Our goal with the Cultura exchange is to develop students' ability to understand another culture. So understanding another culture is not very easy. It's not simply a matter of accumulating facts and knowledge. It goes beyond the cultural capsules found in textbooks. It means understanding attitudes, values, ways of thinking, and interacting. So with Cultura, we decided that online communication tools could offer new possibilities. Because students from two different cultures could interact online, but simply connecting students does not guarantee that they will actually develop intercultural competence. And that's where the role of the teacher is very important. Understanding has to be constructed around specific materials and under a specific task. So the approach that Cultura decided to take is a comparative approach, where two classes of students from two different cultures analyze and compare similar materials drawn from their respective cultures, which are juxtaposed online. And then they exchange perspectives about their differences and similarities via online discussion forums. I will talk about the materials that students compare. And so they compare answers to intercultural questionnaires, images, statistics, films, commercials, newspaper articles, websites. And today we'll focus on the first two items, the questionnaires and the images, because what I want to do today above all is to illustrate the process. So the intercultural questionnaires are at the start of the classic Cultura exchange. And students from both groups answer in L1 a set of identical questionnaires. And I will come back very soon about the use of L1 online. So these questionnaires are designed to involve students and engage them directly from the start. So at the very beginning of an exchange, students answer anonymously online in L1, the three sets of questionnaire, a word association questionnaires, where they answer a question which asks them to associate words to following prompts, such as family, work, USA, suburbs, freedom, etc. With a sentence completion questionnaire, they have to complete sentences such as a good parent, a well-behaved child, a true friend. And in the situation questionnaire, they have to say how they would react in some situations, such as you see a student sitting next to you at an exam who's cheating, you see a mother in a supermarket slapping her child, or you've been waiting in line and in a store and somebody cuts the line in front of you. And the way we design these questionnaires were designed to touch upon different areas of life, different types of relationships, and different locations, work, home, street, store. So the intercultural questionnaires, here I'm returning to the why do students answer in L1. First, because we consider that language is culture. And students speaking in L1 can both express and also access from their partners concepts which could not be easily translated. So if you think in English, you think concepts such as home. Home is way more than simply a word. It doesn't mean house or dwelling. It means something way more. Or a word such as care, such as in caring about, or feel in expressions such as hurt my feelings or care about someone's feeling. There would be, when I work in French, it would be very, very hard to translate with a single word. So we're more interested in the concept behind words than about the word alone. So the second reason why we use L1 is that because students access authentic content, which is not from a textbook, and it becomes their textbook, and it provides a very, very rich vocabulary. And since it's written, they have time to read, use a dictionary, circle the words, discuss the words. And then my last two items here, L1 is used only online, and L2 is always used in class. And class becomes a place where they recycle immediately what they've picked from what their counterparts have written in French when I work with my French-American exchange, for instance. So as I hope to demonstrate, language is at the center, at the heart of the process with Cultura. So we're going to take a look at what happens when the students have answered the questionnaire. So the answers are published side by side online, and they do provide an entry point into both cultures. They're analyzed by students online and in class, and the juxtaposition allows differences to emerge. So I took an example of a word which is very easy to translate. Suburbs in French is banlieue. But again, even if the dictionary translation is very easy, the reality under is way more complex. As you can see here, on the left, the suburbs are associated with grass, home, peace, comfort, quiet. And on the French side, pauvreté means poverty. There is a notion of défavorisé, which means disadvantage. There is something about periphery, poverty, criminality, and a few other words of the same type. So I will describe now that you see in this example, I will describe the process, how students work with the questionnaires. So before coming to class, they print the page or the type of page that you just saw. They count, they regroup words. They look at words that appear on one side only. They try to decide, do they have positive, negative connotations? It's very hard to know sometimes. They make hypotheses about what it says about the other culture, and they ask questions to their partners. So what happens in the classroom reflects the same process. First, just to remind you that everything in the classroom happens in L2. Students work in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. The classroom is a place to share ideas, combine ideas, discuss. So here on the picture, you see a student looking at the list. It's very important that whatever they do is always based on observation. And they summarize essential observations on the board for all to see. So here is another picture of a board where you can see that students have been working in small groups, putting things on the board, and then they walk from board to board. They make connections, which is essential to the process. It widens the scope of inquiry, and they start to see patterns. So now I'm going to let you know about the online forums, because the students have been working on their own, then with their peers in the classroom, and then the conversation moves onto the online forums. So the forums are multiple, which means there is one forum per topic or prompt. They are collective and open to all students. It means they're not threaded, so everybody sees at first glance what everybody else has said about each topic. They are asynchronous, which gives time for reflection and shows how conversations evolve. They are written in L1 outside of class, and but they are an integral part of the class. And on the forum, students pose comments, make hypotheses, ask questions, react to their partner's comments. and then the forums are brought back to the classroom. So their end goal is not to create a consensus among all students, but rather to enable a discussion where issues are raised and debated. And I have a few examples of the type of things that really tell us that students are following the process. So they share observations. You see things such as, I noticed that. They make hypotheses. Is it possible that? It seems that. They ask questions. Oh, what does the word dortoir mean? They answer questions. And here what is in italics, I have translated from the French. So it would be a French student saying, oh, in French, the suburbs are seen as. They get answers. And well, thanks for clearing things up. They acknowledge the other's posting. Oh, my experiences dovetail with those of Jack and 111 and Melodian one. They challenge the others. But where do poor people live in the US? How can they afford to live in the city? The online forums allude to the importance of the context. For instance, in Chicago, we see the suburbs as a place where, and they also confront cliché. These coming from a French student. Well, it's very interesting because you saw on the French side, the comments are very negative about banlieue. But these students said, well, there are in fact rich suburbs in France. If the word banlieue has such a negative connotation for us, it's because the media always connect violence and suburbs. So the French students wonder about what made them have such a reaction, and they start discussing the role of media and own representation. And the forums also provide pertinent real-life illustrations, which there was a hint of that when the students said, oh, in Chicago, etc., and then they talk a lot about. So the online forums, coming back to the language, they do also provide raw material for language learning. So the acronyms, HLN, CD, all of these, the cultural references such as flick and donuts, the registers, they do very often discuss different ways to say something. So here there was a question for the French on how did you say be quiet in French, so tais-toi, taisez-vous, etc. The online forums also, on the online forums, students do bring a lot of primary sources to support a point, engage their peers, open up the discussions. And more they bring in newspapers, statistics, YouTube videos. So here in this one, translated from a French posting, still discussing the suburbs, a French student, recommends two movies, very important movies for the French. La Haine, have you seen the movie La Haine, or Entre les Murs, life in a middle school in the suburbs, and also brings into his comment the Desperate Housewives. So they're using similar type of documents to see what type of image is presented. These students, interesting, provided links to articles, newspaper articles he had read in the New York Times. But I highlighted, it was my highlighting the three lines at the bottom, because he did not simply read what an American newspaper was writing about France, but he said, I would be curious to hear from our French counterparts if they feel this is a fair assessment. So he's adding to his own having access to a newspaper article, asking for the French ideas. And here, another French student has another suggestion. He says, well, to support Virgil's statement about banlieue equals riots, suburbs equals desperate housewives, well, go to google.fr and type banlieue and suburbs. And that's what they did. So they came up with a suburbs and a suburb and a banlieue and a banlieue. Okay? And I want from their transition to images, because I think I hope you have a good idea of what things happen with the questionnaires. But images are often a unit on their own, meaning we ask students to choose images to illustrate their daily life. And then not only the images illustrate a topic, but then the students reflect on what the images they have selected say about themselves. For instance, a student posted the construction going on outside my dorm. So by itself, it's just, what the student sees. But then a friend said, oh, that's so cool, that's so American. But what did they focus on? They focused on the size of the truck. and posted, so it became a juxtaposition of big and small. And this is la voiture sans permis, a small car you can drive without having a permit. Very often, the French will post very touristic views of their own country, Eiffel Tower, a house in Normandy. Talking about sports, they will talk about soccer or pétanque, whereas the students here will talk about, Red Sox and the Yankees. But even as they talk about pétanque, which is a traditional game, the French will say, why do we even talk about pétanque? It's a bit a cliché. We hardly ever play pétanque. Talking about themselves, my American student will have here's a picture of me, which I do not show here today, but there's a picture of her. And there's a picture of my friend with a funny hat, and look at my half of the room. And that's a very, very messy room. On the French side, we don't get to see their rooms. We see La Résidence Albert Camus, or we see La Résidence Albert Camus, or one. So there is something here that students came to realize. The French do not actually show themselves. They do not open the boundaries that between public and private space. And it led them to reflect on how space is represented. A classroom here by my American students shows people using a space. The classroom is just a classroom. It's a function. It's a place where you can have a class. And I hope, again, you get a sense of all the things that can be done with images. I want to talk about another element that I use also in class that reinforces the process, which is keeping a blog. I frequently ask one of my students in each class, interns, to keep track of class discussions and to post on a blog, on the class blog, the topics that were discussed and to list the main points that were made. It's separate from the Cultura forum. And at the very beginning, my intention was I was teaching 2 sessions, the discussions go in very different directions, and I needed to keep track of what was unfolding in each class. And I realized that the class blog often describes the process followed on the forums. Students will say, we wondered, we noticed, we hypothesized, and the entries give a large place to vocabulary. For instance, a student noted that dodo and Karcher had not been elucidated during class, but that note was made to ask the French students. So I think this is a perfect illustration how, with this last example, how language and culture meet and how communication with the others seems a very good way to enter into the culture. So I will conclude by reflecting on the process. The first thing, that communication tools have to be used in a purposeful way to well-defined pedagogical goals. The role of the teacher has to change to give voice to the students, but is no less central than in the past. The task is essential in creating the need to interact meaningfully. Discovering the other also means discovering oneself. The students constantly explain their culture and think about their ways of doing everything. And finally, working with a partner across cultures is in itself an exercise in intercultural collaboration and understanding. Thank you.
This is Stephen, and thank you very much for your presentation. There are a number of questions that have been posed in the chat.
Should I listen to you? You will read them to me?
Yes, yes. Before I select questions from the chat, I want to sort of point out 2 things that appeared in your presentation that sort of might have passed people by.
Okay.
One of them is that people are asking a lot about the use of language, which I know is typical. When people first hear about Cultura, the idea that the students use their native, or rather the language of the country where they are in the exchange, is kind of strange, because people think, shouldn't they be practicing the L2, the language that they're trying to learn? But you explained that if they use L1 in their exchange with their partners, number one, all of the language that appears is native and therefore is sort of authentic language. Number two, they don't suffer any constraint when they want to express an idea. They're using a language that is native, or maybe they're bilingual, that they're highly proficient in, instead of struggling to express that idea in the target language. However, when that online portion is over and they go back to class, then in class they're using L2 because your French class is conducted mostly in French. And one thing that I noticed was one of your slides showed the board, and it showed a comparison between France and the US. So the students obviously were working in class to try to summarize what had happened in the exchange. In the exchange, the languages both were used. The French side was posting in French, the US side was posting in English. However, in class, when they were summarizing that content, not only was the content from the French side in French, but the content regarding Americans was also in French. So at that point, they were taking the things that happened in the exchange and bringing them into the classroom. In the classroom, they're dealing with them in French.
Yeah, it's not systematic. In fact, I on my own, I mostly encourage them to use the words they picked from the forums, etc. So it might have happened in a group, it might happen with some students, but it's not something I ask them. And in fact, I tell them to keep, in fact, the words they found. Again, I was quoting the word home or care, etc., which are impossible to translate. And so it's a good observation on your part, but it's not, at least when they quote, I say, well, quote the words that were used. No, if it's, I don't know if I answered your question.